And welcome, Hoosier fans, to this week's edition of Assembly Call Radio. This is episode number 38 of Assembly Call Radio, and it is our 330th episode overall of the Assembly Call, recorded on the evening of Thursday, August 3rd, 2017. I am Jared Morris, your host for this week's edition of Assembly Call Radio, where each week we discuss the most important IU basketball stories from the past 7 days. And remember, if you can't catch one of our shows live, you can always catch up with our podcast, which is available everywhere. Just search for Assembly Call wherever you listen to podcasts, and you will find us. All righty, well, let's begin how we always begin, and that is with our Hoosier Proud banner moment. And the banner moment for me this week came actually yesterday during a conversation that I had with Gary Parrish of CBS Sports for Podcast on the Brink. And one of the questions that I asked Gary, who knows Archie Miller very well and was very, very positive about the choice of Archie Miller for Indiana and what he thinks Archie can do, I asked him what the reasons will be if it doesn't work out for Archie. I think we're all very aware of what the reasons will be if it does work out, and a lot of us are very confident that it will. So if it doesn't, what will those reasons be? Recruiting, the wrong fit. If that somehow happens, what will it be? And his answer, he kind of stopped and paused, and he said he's just never even considered it not working. So he basically said he can't even answer that question because he just doesn't consider it a possibility. Now, he did say, expecting multiple national championships might be a bit extreme and a little bit unreasonable in terms of expectations. But as he said, when you put a terrific coach at a terrific school, good things happen. He considers, obviously, Archie Miller to be a terrific coach and Indiana to be a terrific program. And so he's expecting big things, as we all are. So that made me very confident and even more excited about that future banner to be hung in Simon Scott Assembly Hall. And I will say this, too. I think the football team deserves a little bit of mention with College Game Day announcing that they will be there for the IU-Ohio State game, which is going to be awesome and an incredible way to kick off the college football season. And someone asked on Twitter who should do the picking for the IU-Ohio State game, kind of represent Indiana. The name I threw out was Rob Finney, because that way if he picks IU, then he can pick IU over Ohio State twice. So that's my thought. Andy Ryan, you can give me your thoughts on who you think would be the best IU representative as well. But that was this week's banner moment, brought to you by our friends at HoosierProud.com. And now let me introduce my esteemed co-hosts for the evening. To my left, we have one of the world's most respected bracketologists and the president of the Robert Johnson Fan Club. He is Andy Bottoms. Andy, what is your Bottoms line from the past week in Indiana basketball?
Well, on the football front, I'm so excited. Even for those watching on the video, I have a College Game Day shirt on to commemorate this event. So certainly exciting. Will be a cool atmosphere there. I'm sure.
We know you didn't get that at a game at Indiana, so
absolutely not. And unlike Jared, who probably would have said somebody, some famous writer or somebody gave it to him. I got this shirt from Lee Corso or something like that. I didn't drop that in, but. So, yeah, I mean, for me, I think a couple other schedule things came out this week. So that's, every week it feels like that gets a little bit closer to being finalized. I think generally, not a bad one for IU in terms of, Big Ten schedule with how that came out. I'm sure we'll talk about that a little bit later. I think some of the single play road games, I think they caught some breaks there. And again, as we kind of talked about, maybe one of those is one of those early season games that could benefit. But the one that has yet to be confirmed, but has at least been reported on Crimson Quarry. I'm not sure if any place else was around the potential season opener against Indiana State, which I think would be cool. And I think, we've talked about a few things, wanting to figure out how to play, some of the other schools in and around the state. I think that certainly helps to do that. We saw that, playing, IPFW last year didn't work out so well, but I think playing Indiana State, a team from a solid Missouri Valley Conference that is one that's probably, while it might not be a great RPI win, if they're able to do it, is not going to be a terrible blemish on there either. So I think some of those kinds of things on relatively short notice in terms of putting the schedule together, I think they've done a pretty good job. So it feels like not too many more games really to be announced, and we'll have a good idea of the season, start planning out post game shows.
And to my right, we have a San Diego native who is absolutely reveling in what he is certain is God's curse on Dean Spanos. He's a columnist for The Big Lead, and he is someone who, much to his surprise, did not make Inside the Hall's list of the top 25 players in the Big Ten, which we're going to talk about here in a bit. But he has seen tape on all of them. He actually discovered 21 of them, and he's certain he could beat the other 4 one-on-one. He is Ryan Phillips. Ryan, what do you want to rant about this week?
It's funny with my intro every week. It's like you're living in my brain. I don't know how you do it, Morris, but it's impressive. Actually,
I try to channel you with these intros.
It was a slow week for Indiana basketball news, so I kind of want to go personal with my rant. A high school in San Diego, a K through 12 Christian high school, Horizon Christian, shut down this week. Shockingly, this is a school that produced several NBA players: Jared Dudley, Jeff Withey, who played at Kansas, a bunch in there as well. Several guys and a lot of top college talent, and it shockingly shut down. So a lot of teachers are out of jobs. A lot of coaches are out of jobs, and a lot of students are having to switch schools. This was a team that my high school faced 3 out of 4 years in high school. We faced them in the city championship for basketball and lost all 3 times because they were so good. They were able to recruit like the best players under the guise of, well, it's a Christian school. They want to go get a religious education, and no other schools are allowed to recruit. But hey, they were within the rules. They did what they did, and they had phenomenal teams to the point where we were in the small school division statewide. But there were a lot of really good small school basketball teams, and they would go compete against the top big school teams and beat them repeatedly. And so it's really sad for me that school is closing. I know it doesn't really relate to a big part of our audience, but support your local schools, public or private, because it is kind of sad when one has to shut down and loses its funding. But one thing I will say is if they were 20 years too late, because I would have won 3 city championships if they had shut down before I was in high school. So it's kind of a bummer that they shut down now. I don't get to benefit from that. But no, seriously, that was a sad note for me this morning, sort of one of our high school rivals to see that school shut down. So I guess it's good for my high school. Maybe they'll be able to win some championships now, but sad for that one. And let's move on to some Indiana stuff after that.
And we're excited to welcome back 99.95% of our audience that is not based in San Diego.
Hey, you know what? It's a general topic, all right?
All right, well, we do have a packed show for you tonight about Indiana topics. We promise we're going to get into the latest on Indiana's schedule. Andy kind of alluded to it there during his bottoms line. We're going to talk more about that. We will break down Inside the Hall's top 25 Big Ten players, how many Hoosiers made the list. We've got a few good questions on Twitter, and we got a question about the Assembly Call origin story, and we're going to talk about that. I actually dug up the original email that I sent to Andy with the idea, so I'll read you part of that as well. All of that and more on this week's edition of Assembly Call Radio. First, real quick, a quick word about this week's sponsor, SeatGeek. As you know, buying tickets to sports and concerts can be complicated, but there is a better, simpler way to buy with SeatGeek. SeatGeek is the smartest, easiest way to get tickets to live events. With SeatGeek's seamless mobile experience, you can buy and sell tickets in just 2 taps. SeatGeek helps you find the best seats at the best prices, fully guaranteed. There's nothing quite like seeing your favorite team or musician in person, and SeatGeek will get you closer to the action for a great value. I have the SeatGeek app on my phone. It is by far the easiest way that I have found to shop for tickets, which I have done for basketball games, for concert tickets. If you're looking to go to that IU Ohio State football game, go on SeatGeek, find tickets there. It is designed to make your ticket buying experience easier than ever because SeatGeek saves you time and money by searching multiple ticket sites to compare prices and find amazing deals for you. Best of all, listeners to the Assembly Call get $20 off their first SeatGeek purchase. Just download the SeatGeek app and enter the promo code ASSEMBLY today. That's promo code ASSEMBLY, ASSEMBLY, for $20 off your first SeatGeek purchase. And I've actually had, 3 or 4 people just in the last couple of weeks let me know that they used the code. Everything worked great. So go use the code. Get your tickets from SeatGeek. All right, you are listening to the Assembly Call. I am Jared Morris here with Andy Bottoms and Ryan Phillips talking IU basketball. And Andy, let's actually jump in a little bit more to the schedule talk. I think that's a good topic for us to hit right here real quick. You mentioned opening with Indiana State, and Indiana State, a team that wasn't great last year. They've actually kind of been getting progressively worse the last few years, but they are still a team that's been, I think, at least in the top 200 in KenPom the last 5 years. And as recently as 5-6 years ago, they were a top 100 team. So it's certainly better than, some of the cupcakes that we have seen come through. And we also found out the single-play home and away games for Indiana's Big Ten schedule. So Indiana, the single-play home games will be Purdue, Maryland, Northwestern, and Penn State. And what jumps out to me about all of those is those are road venues that Indiana has really struggled in lately. So nice that we don't have to go visit any of those. The single play away games for Indiana are Wisconsin, Rutgers, Michigan, and Nebraska. So at least we don't have to waste a home game on Rutgers. But obviously going to Wisconsin and not getting a chance to beat them at Assembly Hall, that's not such a great thing. But what else jumps out to you, Andy, about the schedule?
I thought the road games, I think if you look, Nebraska, Rutgers, I think most people are going to project them to be bottom 2 in the league. So a chance to pick up a couple road wins. We know how important those can be. Michigan will certainly be a tough one there. And Wisconsin, we've all got the demons from the Kohl Center. But if ever there was a year where there's a lot of transition on the roster from Wisconsin, and I think we talked about this in one of those conversations about, who would you want to play in those early Big Ten games? Is it one of those? Is that do you hit them at a good time? So I think certainly 2-2 feels like a minimum in those games. And then the home games, I mean, you're playing, of most people have Purdue and Northwestern, I would say, in the top 4 in the league that they would project, but you get, those 2 on your home floor. It gives you a little bit better chance to win, pick up quality wins there. I think Maryland is kind of in that next tier down with, the freshmen they had last year should certainly be a good team. So again, another one probably would rather not face on the road. Penn State just seems like, weird games between those 2 teams. So who knows what will happen there. So, overall, I don't think too bad when you look at the double plays that we had already known about for a while. Illinois should be more toward the bottom of the league. Ohio State's in a transitional period, but then you've got Michigan State and Minnesota, 2 of the other kind of top 4, and then Iowa one in the middle. So I think fairly good balance. Would certainly rather, not waste single play home games on Nebraska and Rutgers. So that to me is a positive thing. And, we know how hard it is for teams, no matter how good they are, to come into Assembly Hall. So I think that'll be, I think all in all, not too bad, probably middle of the road. I haven't compared to others, but I think a lot of things to like, at least initially from a scheduling standpoint.
The other interesting news, and this came out in the Indiana release, it's not official yet, but it sounds like we are on the path toward certain rivalries in the Big Ten being protected. Indiana, Purdue being one of them, Michigan State being another. Obviously, on the one hand, you could look at that as a disadvantage for Indiana and Purdue because they tend to be 2 of the better schools in the league. But I think everybody agrees, including everybody I've talked to from both fan bases, that those 2 teams should play twice every single year, home and away, without exception. I certainly agree with that. Ryan, do you see any reason why that shouldn't be a protected rivalry?
I get it in the unbalanced schedule, why they do it. I guess like everybody else, I'd love to see it stay as it is, just like I'd like to see, Michigan, Ohio State play every year despite an unbalanced schedule in football and things like that. I mean, there's certain things that you kind of want to happen every year. So I think, I don't know. I first of all, I think it's a good thing that Archie Miller doesn't have to go to Mackey in his first year. That one game is at Assembly Hall. Not that I think we're worried about going in Mackey. I think it's just good that if we're going to get one game in his first year, it's nice to get introduced to the rivalry at home, I think. So I think that's a positive, but yeah, I would like to see that rivalry happen every year, one at each spot, just like I'd like to see Kentucky happen every year. Doesn't mean it's going to happen. Doesn't mean I get to have what I want, but that would be a nice thing to have just because it seems to always have been the way that we've done it. But there've been a couple times in recent memory where they only played once, and it does feel like an empty, a bit of an empty trip when that happens.
I think it's interesting. I like it for IU purposes, obviously, but then you start to kind of look down the list, and it's like, who are the natural? I don't know because there hasn't been an official release. Do you actually have one of those for everybody? So you could certainly see IU, Purdue, probably Michigan State type thing.
Everybody's trying to claim Rutgers as their rival.
Who do you imagine? Yeah, long hated rival with Rutgers. Yeah, so that's what I don't really understand is that like maybe they don't bother and try to.
It sounded like there was only going to be 3.
Create one.
Like, Illinois, Northwestern, the other one, or along with Michigan State, and that was it.
Okay. All right. Well, that would be okay. Yeah, because that's where I could see it start to become more of a disadvantage to your point of, most years IU and Purdue are going to be pretty good, but it's really more the fact that, oh, well, if I know I'm somebody and I'm Maryland and I'm, fighting with Rutgers for the, Eastern, the Big Ten Eastern Seaboard, how you try to figure that out. So that's
I can
good
see
to hear if that
Wisconsin,
is how they end up doing it.
I can see Wisconsin, Minnesota also. I mean, that's not a great rivalry, but the states are rivals of each other.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, maybe they could play for the same axe they play for in football. I mean, that could be exciting.
Wisconsin would win and just take an axe to the barn in general. Just start hacking away at that place and tear it down.
No one here would be opposed to that.
Especially Josh Newkirk. All right, that does it for our first segment here on the Assembly Call. Stick with us. We are going to break down the always entertaining Inside the Hall list of the top 25 players in the Big Ten who made it from Indiana. We'll tell you. Stick around. It's coming up. All right. First segment done. And hello to everybody watching live on YouTube. Always great to have y'all here. Good first segment, fellas.
We know.
I mean, that was just a great rant, Ryan. Absolutely.
Hey, you know what?
On topic. Just.
Hey, every once in a while, you got to go outside the show's comfort zone.
Got to keep people. Got to keep people on their toes. Literally, no one saw that coming. So, to be fair,
nothing happened this week. Right. All right.
There's a lot that happened. Schedule news.
You guys took it all.
25 list.
If you guys hadn't taken it all, I would have done it. But you guys took the two things I was thinking of. I would have done the game day thing, but you mentioned that in your.
Oh well, you could have still piggybacked on that.
You were all around, all over the place on yours, Morris. Stick to topic. Damn
it. Okay. All right. So segment 2, we'll break down San Diego area high school football teams. We'll do our preseason rankings.
I've got them all queued up right here.
Okay, good. Because
we'll review the favorite colors of all of Philip Rivers' kids. That should take a little while. I
see live viewers dropping off one by one.
That'll take 3 shows.
Yes. Okay, so we'll jump in, do this top 25. I'll introduce this.
25 down anywhere? Or should I just pull up all the?
Yeah, it's on the list. I wrote down who made it from each team and how many. So Andy, I will.
Oh, okay, there it is.
Well, okay, so let's. Well, first off, we'll start talking about who made it from Indiana, and so we'll discuss that angle of it, and then we'll jump in and take a broader picture. Like talk about the teams that had the most guys and how representative that is of how we think the Big Ten will be.
Big Lead did top 50 college basketball players last week too.
I'm guessing. Did Indiana have anybody on that list? Did Robert make it?
Robert Johnson made it. I put him on.
Did he legitimately make it, or did you slip him in late in the editing process?
I thought he was a top 50 guy.
I mean, I agree. I think he is.
Yeah. No, I thought he was top. Jason was asking my opinion, and I put him in at. Let me see where I put him.
Nice.
It was in the 40s.
11. No, I'm just kidding.
That's where he is on Andy's list.
Is that what number was the Dayton guy that you posted about today, Ryan? That got down in.
I could have ranted about that. Robert Johnson was 45th.
Okay. I can see that. All right.
I can talk about that. I know it's Andy's boy, but I can talk about that.
No, you're fine.
Because I wrote it.
All right. And he does that with, what's the site that he does that with? Inside the Hall. Is it
it's like UM Hoops? His name is Dylan something.
Yeah, Dylan Burkhart. Yeah, I think it's UM Hoops.
I can
let me get that right though.
Yeah, I can look it up.
Yeah, umhoops.com. That's who it is.
Is that Maryland or Michigan?
No, Michigan.
Yep.
All right. You ready to do this?
Yep.
Here we
Isaac Haas at number 10.
Yeah, no. Purdue has 4 guys on there. All right, here we go. Here we go. You are listening to the Assembly Call. I'm Jared Morris here with Andy Bottoms and Ryan Phillips talking IU basketball. And gentlemen, let's jump in and discuss the list of the top 25 Big Ten players put out. It's a joint post every year by our friends at Inside the Hall, Alex Bozich and then Dylan Burkhart at UM Hoops. They do this every year. They count down the top 25 players in the Big Ten. Last year, Indiana obviously was very well represented on that list with guys like OG Anunoby and Thomas Bryant and James Blackman Jr., fewer Hoosiers making the list this year. There were 2 guys who made the top 25. Ryan, real quick, can you name them? Who do you think Indiana's 2 representatives are?
I would say Deron Davis for sure, and I would guess because he's a senior and he had a bunch of career highs last year, it would be Robert Johnson would be the other.
Who do you think is higher?
Duran.
Okay, so Deron Davis did make the list. He was actually a tie for 25th with Mike Watkins from Penn State. Robert Johnson came in at 13th. And it is interesting.
That does surprise me.
I mean, it's interesting. Now, part of that could be, obviously, we have spent so much time talking about Deron and his potential, and we saw the flashes of his production last year. But you got to remember, from a perspective outside of Indiana, what Deron Davis did last year probably isn't that impressive when you just kind of look at him if you aren't watching this stuff minute by minute like we are. So, Alex probably had him higher than Dylan did, and maybe that's what, kind of accounted for that. But
I think also, let me just jump in real quick. I think also we know how valuable Duran will be to the team.
Yes.
And I think that is why we rate him higher than some other guys. I thought it would have been like 15 and 16 or something, close. I didn't think there would be much of a discrepancy. But I would say that I think Duran, I guess it depends on your criteria, because I think Duran will be a more important player and may actually put up better numbers because of how much the focus will be. And we have other guards who will split stats with Robert. So I guess it depends on the criteria you're using, but I think that for sure in our minds, Duran is a more valuable player to the program right now than Robert is. Obviously, Robert's got leadership qualities and things like that will be very important as well. So I'm not discounting his importance, but I would have certainly put Deron Davis ahead of Robert, not just because I've always been high on him, but because I think that there is that extra added bonus of his importance to the team.
Andy, Robert Johnson at 13th. How does that strike you? About right?
Yeah, that seems right to me. I think what's interesting when you kind of look at Duran and some of the guys who are immediately in front of him, for the most part, and because maybe this is speaks to the overall kind of quality of the Big Ten. There aren't a lot of one and done type guys that are there. Most of the guys in front of Duran are a bit more established or have kind of proven that they can do it in in the size of role that he's going to have this year. And I think that probably speaks a lot to why Robert Johnson is there. Certainly there's a little bit of projecting forward with him to try to say, he's going to need to pick up the slack from a scoring standpoint with James Blackman gone, with Thomas Bryant gone, and those kinds of things. So they feel right to me. I think, you could certainly make an argument that when this is all said and done, maybe those two are flip-flopped, or at the very least, Duran could be the guy who rises the most of the people who are on this list. But I think for now, based on what we know, what we've seen, it's a little bit tough to project some of these guys, and so it seems like they kind of put Duran on the lower end with the thought that there's probably some upward potential there.
Yeah, at the Big Lead, we did our top 50 college basketball players for this season, and there was one Hoosier on it. It was Robert Johnson. He slipped in at 45, and here's what we wrote about him. I mean, just for a perspective for you guys. A 3-year starter for the Hoosiers, Johnson averaged a career high in points, rebounds, and three-pointers made and minutes per game in 2016. He's a fantastic on-ball defender who should fit perfectly in Archie Miller's system. I think that's kind of where we're at with him right now, and I think that's kind of the general belief is that he's going to fit really well in what Archie Miller's doing. And just for another Big Ten perspective, number 2 on the list, just behind Michael Porter Jr., the freshman for Missouri, number 2 was Miles Bridges of Michigan State, who I believe was is going to be number 1 on the Inside the Hall list.
Yeah, let's also just
spoiler alert, by the way, because that's coming out tomorrow.
Yeah, that's coming out. Yeah, so we actually don't know the order of the top 5. Although with a list like this, you can kind of guess who the top 5 guys are when they're the only ones who haven't been
Miles
released.
Bridges has to be number 1.
He has to be number 1, and then your favorite player, Ethan Happ, probably is number 2.
He was number 15. He was number 15 on the Big Lead list, and I argued vociferously against that.
I'm sure you
did.
If
it was a list of people who travel the most every time they touch the ball, he'd certainly
be number 1.
But that's that's not what we're measuring here. So.
Okay, so one more point on Robert Johnson. Let's just remember, Robert averaged 12.8 points per game last year. Another guard who averaged 12.8 points per game in his junior year was Greg Graham. And going into his senior year, he probably would have been rated around 13th or 15th, something like that in the conference. Had a huge senior year. Graham bumped up to 16.5 points per game, defensive player of the year in the conference. We will see where Robert Johnson ends up. But, I think, we talk a lot about Deron Davis's potential, and sometimes the reason I mention this, obviously, because I love getting mentions of Greg Graham in there, but the reason I mention this is,
by the way, if you guys are at home, you can drink. The Greg Graham mention came through, so go ahead and take a drink.
So sometimes, we look at a guy who's been around for 3 years and we think that, he probably doesn't have potential. We kind of know what he is. You kind of know what to expect, and you do. But, he's still in college, and with a great offseason and with a new role and a new system, he very well could jump up and have an even better season. So I think it's important, to not think that we've seen everything that we can see from Robert Johnson. There's still a lot of untapped potential there. And again, a guy like Greg Graham showed that in Indiana history. So just something to remember, something to keep in mind. You are listening to The Assembly Call. I'm Jared Morris here with Andy Bottoms and Ryan Phillips talking IU basketball. We were talking about the top 25 players in the Big Ten, the list put out by Inside the Hall and Hoops. So here's the thing. Indiana has 2 players on this list. There are 3 teams with 4 players: Michigan State, Minnesota, and Purdue. They're kind of the favorites in the Big Ten. Michigan has 3. Northwestern has 3, if you include the guys mentioned in the honorable mention. I think for Indiana to, get out of that middle of the pack and maybe compete, and be 4th or 5th or even higher in the Big Ten, if we were to do a list like this at the end of the year, there need to be more than 2 names on it. So my question for you guys is, I think we would all agree that the most obvious name for who it would be Juwan Morgan. And I think if Indiana is going to succeed, Juwan Morgan needs to be healthy. And if he is, I think he can be a top 25 player. Who's the other guy after Juwan that you think has potential at the end of the year to be on a list like this? Andy?
That's a tough one. I mean, I feel like he's the obvious answer. I think, when we start looking at value for IU's team, you would put Colin Hartman in that conversation. I just don't know if numbers wise, when it's all said and done, that he ends up being a guy who finds his way there. So that's a tough one. If Devontae Green really settles into the point guard role, but again, I just don't know that he would score quite enough to be there. So kind of makes you wonder if, could a freshman really make a big leap in something there? But I don't think there's an obvious next choice, not to me at least.
You're missing the guy. Ryan, do you know who it is?
Devontae Green for me. That is who it is. And Curtis Jones is in the mix as well, but I think he's got a long way to go. And I don't know if he'll get there this year, but I think we'll see him on the path to be on the list next year. But I don't know if he'll do enough to get there this year. Devontae,
but I guess what I'm saying is if we assume that Indiana will be a top 3, top 4 team in the Big Ten, like if that's what happens, to me, Curtis Jones is the guy who makes that jump. I'm not saying it will happen, although I'm very high on him, but he seems like the guy with the biggest ceiling among those that is such a big question mark. Because he's got the skills to be a go-to scorer if he can put it together.
No, I agree. I just think from what we saw last year, I think the leap is too far from that to this year. I think he could be a very good bench, points off the bench guy, but I don't think he's going to be there yet to take over games scoring wise or to provide a huge lift scoring wise. I think he'll be a nice piece and could be at his peak, could be a really nice scorer and maybe even a starter, towards the end of the year. But the guy that I think is the guy that you target is, and I agree with Andy that I think Colin Hartman would be the first name you think of other than Juwan Morgan. But I agree. I don't think the numbers are ever going to be there. And I don't think that he is a guy who numbers are the key to what he does. He does so many of those Colin Hartman things. And so there are things that don't show up in the box score that make him valuable. The guy I think is going to be, would be on that list if Indiana has a successful season is Devontae Green.
So what do we think about the non-Indiana players on there? I mean, obviously Michigan State is loaded. 4 players in the top 16, and you look at a guy like Jaren Jackson, who's number 16, a potential top 10 pick. I mean, he could be, first or second team All Big Ten, and no one would be shocked. Minnesota with 4 guys, and obviously Purdue with 4 guys. I mean, Andy, as you look through the list, do you think it's pretty representative of how you kind of have the teams stacked up in your mind heading into the season?
Yeah, I think the one, if you want to look at, kind of a top 4, even as I just look through, some of these preseason top 25s, which, take those all with a grain of salt, but the ones that have been updated, since the draft declarations and things like that. I mean, those 3 are consistently ranked the highest, and Northwestern's the other one. I think part of that, they've got Vic. I think Vic Law was in the honorable mention, perhaps. And certainly Bryant McIntosh is in there. Maybe Vic Law was one of the other guys.
He was honorable mention.
And Scotty Lindsey was in there. So, to a certain extent, the way they play is not necessarily such that they're going to get a ton of guys, a ton of guys there. But so they would be the one of the other teams that seems to be thought of by most to be toward the top there. But I think, generally that shakes out pretty well. And then really your next tier after that, you've got, I'd say, Michigan, maybe Maryland, and they kind of come in next in terms of number of players. Iowa's a little interesting to me just in the sense that, they lost Peter Jock, but they do have everybody else back. Tyler Cook made the list. I think Jordan Bohannon was an honorable mention, but they just played so many guys last year. They had, they got a lot of guys back, but only a couple who average in double figures, even though virtually everyone is there. So I think they'd be an interesting team for me just to watch as the season goes on as to how they do. And Wisconsin, I think most people would say is interesting to only have one, but when you really look at it, there aren't a lot of known commodities on that roster besides Ethan Happ. So we can all assume that there'll be some obscure guy that we haven't heard a whole lot about that's going to step up and go through it that way. But that's kind of one that might jump out just in terms of where we think in our minds think they're going to be to only have one player. But I think when you look at their roster, there's not a clear-cut other choice.
Is there anybody down on the list other than Deron Davis that you think could really finish higher? I mean, I mentioned Jaren Jackson, who I think is a guy who could easily jump up higher. I actually look at it, and Carson Edwards at 23, he's an interesting guy. He's had a big summer. Obviously he's going to be able to take more of a lead role now with Caleb Swanigan gone. He seems like a guy who could end up a little bit higher on that list too. Ryan, anybody jump out to you?
I think Mo Wagner is going to fall down that list. I think he's a guy who should have gone pro. I think he rode a really high wave last year and really had a good stretch of games before the end of the season. And I think that he should have stayed in the NBA draft. I think he's going to be a guy that's going to fall a little bit this year. Guys will be looking for him. I don't think that team's going to be as good as it was last year. They kind of snuck up on people last year. And I think that Michigan team is not going to be as good. So I think Wagner is going to fall. I think Bryant McIntosh might fall as well, just because I think that, again, teams are going to be game planning to stop him and beat him up a little bit. And so I think he might fall a little. As far as people going to jump up, I mean, you're right. I think Jaren Jackson could be a big one. I know Nick Ward is ranked 8th, but I think that he and Cassius Winston could both have big years from Michigan State with so much focus on Miles Bridges. So those are the things.
God, they're loaded this year.
They really are. I mean, it's dangerous. If you're going to have a first year when people are going to give you a break on not winning the Big Ten, Archie Miller picked the right year, because everybody's going to have Michigan State picked to win it and to be in the mix for a national title. And then everybody's going to leave because they are a loaded team with a ton of NBA talent. So yeah, as far as like guys we're going to jump up, those are the two those are the two groups that sort of popped up to me. I think Ethan Happ's going to have another good season, although he'll be traveling all over the lane. But clearly they don't call it, so whatever. But yeah, those are the guys who jumped out to me.
So we've had San Diego mention and Ethan Happ traveling mention. So your Ryan Phillips bingo cards are filling up quickly tonight, folks.
Well, you dropped Greg Graham and dropped the name in your intro, so yours are already full.
Perfect. Just a couple quick ones for me that are a little bit further down the list. I think Jayshawn Tate from Ohio State's an interesting one, just because they don't have a whole lot left. So whether he really becomes that much better of a player, I think numbers wise, he's probably going to put some up. You mentioned Carson Edwards. I think Tony Carr of Penn State's another interesting one. It feels like we talk about them every year as maybe being able to kind of finally get things together, but he averaged, 13 points, almost 5 rebounds and 4 assists last year as a freshman. So I think, as a guy who could, potentially make that leap if they end up having a good season, and they've got, a decent number of guys back as well. So those will be the other couple that we didn't mention so far.
I think we should create Ryan Phillips bingo or assembly call bingo for people to play along with at home.
Well, here in San Diego, they have Comic-Con bingo. Since every time I mention San Diego, it's a bingo card.
Look at this! Time for a break.
Yeah, okay, here we go. So that ends this segment.
Bingo. I don't understand why they can't ever.
That ends the segment. Stick with us. We have Twitter questions coming up. Someone asked us about the Assembly Call origin story, and so we were going to tell that coming up next on the Assembly Call. Okay, that was 15:06.
Wow, we're actually being good with the segments this week. Like not over.
Okay, so we've got a little under 20 minutes. Okay, so we want to tell. Let's go with the origin story.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Some of the questions we got.
We should option the rights to Marvel and let them handle the origin story.
No, I thought you were still on Comic-Con bingo. I didn't know where we were.
Certainly got me on that train of thought. No, they actually Comic-Con bingo is awesome. Every bar here down by Comic-Con has it's like guy in a cape, guy with this, guy with that. And I mean, it's, you just drink every time you find one. It's fantastic. Of course, I don't spend any time down there because it's insane, but
okay. So
What were you saying about the other questions?
Yeah, we'll hit. I mean, some of them we can hit really quickly, so we'll just do them. We'll do kind of like quick hits in the final segment.
Yeah, that's fine.
I think that's probably the best way to hit those because we've talked about some of them. So we can go 12, 13 minutes probably with this. So I'll kick it off, and I've got this first email, so I'll read kind of part of that email because.
And do you remember that though from the beginning?
I really don't remember a whole lot, which I don't know.
No, I don't.
You were drinking a lot in those days, Andy.
I think there were certainly shows that I probably was, so that's not altogether inaccurate.
But yeah. I remember what happened, Jared. I'll tell the story of how I got involved, and but it was the very first game you guys were going to do, and Andy couldn't do it. So.
Very first game.
I don't really know why I wouldn't have been able to do it. Oddly enough, because at that point I wasn't really. Kids weren't old enough, and
again,
even born. So.
The drinking. You were in rehab. It's fine.
Yeah, it's possible.
It all kind of came. Yeah, it all kind of came up quickly. I forgot. It was funny rereading the email because I forgot what the kind of the original thought behind it was.
Mm-hmm. I remember.
I'll be interested to hear it.
Okay,
and we can jump in and joke about it. That's what's going to make this interesting.
Yes. Okay.
So do you just want to do the origin, and then if we have time, any other like kind of either games that stand out or anything?
Let's just see where it goes.
Yeah, just see where it goes.
Okay.
We can talk in the chat.
Yeah. Okay.
Hopefully somebody cries during it. I mean, we'll see what happens, but
Oh shoot! Hang on. Who? Oh, Courtney. Okay, I want to make sure I had the name of the person who asked this question.
I should probably look at the other questions as you put them in the. Are they in the thing?
Yeah, they're in there.
Next recruit to commit. That one comes up a lot.
Everybody's ready. I think it'll be Rob Finney.
I would think so. He's supposedly going to make a decision fairly soon, right?
Yeah, within 2 or 3 weeks, I think is what I saw.
I think he's a guy, and I think they drop everybody else but Romeo.
Mm-hmm.
I think they just go super hard at Romeo after that.
And then it's going to be interesting because, I mean, we're in with a lot of top guys in the 2019 class, but there aren't a lot of scholarships projected to be open. Although, new coach, a lot of times you see guys transfer after the first year, which will be interesting to see, if that happens. Because that would open up scholarships.
Juwan Morgan could go after this year if he's healthy, I think.
Could go where?
Go pro.
Juwan Morgan?
Oh, yeah. Dude, we'll talk later. I'll tell you why.
Oh boy.
I mean, is there any other reason why someone would go to the NBA besides they're a really good player? I mean, I just don't think he's good enough to.
Oh no. I think that's what's going to happen. They're starting to go after these Swiss Army knife guys, and he's going to be one.
Wow.
I'm telling you.
I mean, I like the confidence.
No, I'm not saying like he may not even be like first team All Big Ten, but I think he could go because of the Swiss Army knife factor. I'm very confident that could happen. I'm not saying it will, viewers. I'm not predicting that. I'm saying he could.
Hashtag 2-year plan. Hashtag 2-year plan.
There it was.
Shut the
bingo. It's a shame that's not going to make it onto the radio or into the podcast. This is just for our loyal live listeners.
That could be your favorite memory from the show, Jared. All right, let's go. I got to get back to work. Let's do this.
Now I want to talk about Noah Vonleh. Let's go back to that.
Oh, boy.
Okay. All right, here we go. All right. I compose myself. All right, let's do this. You are listening to the Assembly Call. Go to assemblycall.com/join to activate your free membership. By doing so, you will get our weekly 6-banner Saturday news roundup delivered right to your inbox each Saturday or Sunday morning, so you can stay up to date with your Hoosiers during the offseason and even once the season begins. The URL is assemblycall.com/join. I am Jared Morris, talking IU basketball with my co-hosts on the Assembly Call, Andy Bottoms and Ryan Phillips, and this is usually the part of the show where we do our Twitter Q&A. And so we're going to do that, but we're going to spend probably this entire segment on one question. And this question comes to us from Courtney. Thank you for submitting this question, Courtney. She says, maybe you've already covered this, but I'd like to know the history of the Morris-Bottoms-Phillips relationship. how the show came to be. And it's interesting, like I think we've kind of alluded to it and maybe talked about it in generalities, but we've never really told the actual story. And it's interesting because I'm not sure a lot of us remember the actual story, as we were just talking about some of the details off air. But I went back today to prepare for this to look at the initial emails that we all sent kind of about this. And I found the very first email that I sent to Andy. Now, to set the context for this, we all knew each other at this point. I had started a sports blog called Midwest Sports Fans, and Andy was writing, some great college basketball articles for that. I think you were doing a podcast at the time, the Bottoms Line podcast. I think you had already started doing that as well.
Yeah, I think I was doing like fantasy football writing too or something like that. So
yes. Yeah, I think you were. We were doing a lot of fantasy back then. And Ryan, were you writing for Midwest Sports Fans, or did we just know each other through Yardbarker?
I was working. I was running Rumors and Rants, my sports website, and we had done a few joint ventures. We live blogged the draft together a few times, and we had gotten to know each other a little bit through that. When I was aware of Midwest Sports Fan, I had no idea you went to IU, and then we kind of through that got to know each other as going to IU. But yeah, we kind of became buddies through that, I think. Yeah. But more business buddies. I didn't know you very well. We didn't know each other very well. You didn't know what you were in for.
Yeah, well, I mean, the irony of the three
there
of
were
us,
warning signs probably, but to be fair,
a few.
The great irony is the three of us all graduated from IU, but didn't, and now we're doing an IU show, but none of us knew each other until we started doing the show, or just maybe a year before, through blogging. So
we've been in the same room several times. I mean,
right.
So
yes.
Yeah.
So
go back to how it started.
Yeah. So here's the first email. So this is an email that I sent to Andy. So Andy, what are your thoughts on doing the IU post-game reports / call-in shows? I envision us hopping on a conference call, giving our impressions of the game, and then taking callers. It'll take a while to build it up, so it'll be mostly us talking at first, but it could be A, fun, and B, a great way to promote the Bottoms Line and your burgeoning profile as a college basketball expert. Of all the things I've learned doing this blogging nonsense in 3 years, one of the best pieces of advice regarding building a loyal audience is to start with a small niche, give value, and expand. I hate that your columns aren't getting more traffic because they're outstanding, and part of the reason is that not enough people know that they should trust your opinions yet. Doing a podcast like this can build you tons of credibility with IU fans, one of the 10 best college basketball niches to target, in my opinion, in terms of fervor, knowledge, and reach, which will help spread to the rest of what you're trying to do. Thoughts? If you're up for it, I'd love to do a trial run Saturday night after the exhibition game. Also, we need a name. We can go with something punny like the Assembly Call Podcast or something generic like Hoosier Hoops Report, except not that since it's already in use. Let me know if you have ideas. And then
glad to see we went with the very first idea that anyone threw out. Yeah, that sounds good.
And didn't even question it.
And that's where it came. So that, and I had forgotten about that angle of trying to help you promote up what you were doing. And obviously, we've done that. You've written bracketology for the Assembly Call for a while. And I forgot that it was, we had talked about it. Ryan wasn't involved in it at that time, although he came in quickly. But yeah, do you remember that at all?
I mean, as you read that, like parts of that sounded familiar to me. I mean, that was when I was still like working a regular job as I am now, but also like trying to really get into college basketball writing, which was a challenging thing to do with the small child at home. So I think that was the year I just spent tons of time doing college basketball stuff. I did a podcast with Rob Doster, who's now at NBC. And that was when he was running Ballin' as a Habit, and he and Troy Macker would come on the podcast and we would do that. So at that point, like
name dropper.
You could have convinced me to do. Yeah, exactly. So you could have convinced me to kind of do anything to build that. I think I was at that point when like I was really trying to go full force of that and see if something would work. I think that was even before you had mentioned something to me about doing bracketology. If I'm trying to like put the years together, or maybe it was later that year that I kind of did that for one of the first times. So I don't know, but yeah, so it vaguely rings a bell, and certainly you and I had lots of conversations, and I think similar to what Ryan said, we had started kind of connecting online because I somehow figured out that you were an IU guy. And I think when I reached out to you about writing for Midwest Sports Fans, it was kind of under that premise of, oh, I saw you were a IU grad, and kind of started talking about it that way. So kind of a no-brainer. And it's kind of funny to think about, we still talk about some of those early shows and like attempting to take callers and how terrible that idea was. And,
yeah, it didn't work. Did not go
great.
You guys are terrible calling.
No, but big ups to Tyler Jaranovich, who wrote for us for Midwest Sports Fans and kind of helped us as a producer on some of those early shows, because Chronic Hoosier actually called in on our second show, which is kind of crazy to think about.
Yeah.
So the question is, so I was looking through the emails and I saw this one, And then all of a sudden, there's not a whole lot. There's this thread between Andy and I. And then all of a sudden, I've got the next email about this topic is me saying, great job on this, guys. Thanks for taking the time to participate and for having such great points. I think Chronic Hoosier calling in during the second episode and us doubling our live listener count from 17 to 39 and already 3 archive listens on a Sunday night is a sign that this is going to catch on. If you can't tell, I'm pumped. Let's make this the most kick-ass post-game hangout for IU fans on the web. Because if we prove the model, think about how many other teams and other sports this could work for. Think big. But you had done that show, Ryan. So how? And I don't have record of how that came about. Do you remember?
You had advertised that you were going to do a post-game show with Andy on Twitter. And I reached out to you just like, hey, you've helped me out with some stuff at Rumors and Rants, and we had, worked together a few times. If you ever need like an extra guest or somebody to fill in, just let me know. And that was it. I just said, hey, if you ever need help, I'm obviously willing to help. Because I was pretty excited. That was Cody Zeller's first year. And so you emailed me and said, well, Andy can't do the first show. And that's kind of a bad way to kick things off, would be just me talking after the show. Do you want to come on? I was like, sure. And I remember back then I had to call in using my phone. And
I did too. It was Blog Talk Radio.
Yeah. And so I called in and did that. And afterward, I remember, I don't know if it was you sending me a text or something, but you were like, man, you were really good on the air. We need to have you do this more often. I was like, I can come on whenever. And it just sort of opened the door, and it was kind of like, all right, well, let's all just do it together. And
so back then I was actually giving you genuine compliments. That wasn't
it was amazing.
And I was setting the stage for just showing up whenever I felt like it.
Pretty much. Yeah.
Not always being on the show. So look, if you don't establish these ground rules right out of the gate, you just never know. And then
people have expectations of you to show up to work and things like that. You can't do that.
Yeah. So you're listening to the Assembly Call. This is Jared Morris with Ryan Phillips, Andy Bottoms. We are taking a little break here from talking IU basketball to give the origin story of the Assembly Call. It was a question that Courtney asked us. So you're right, Ryan. That was 2011-12. So this season coming up will be our 7th season doing the Assembly Call. And it's interesting because obviously those first 3 years of the Tom Crean era, not good. That 2011-12 season was much better than expected. And that team was just rolling. And I remember it was a running joke early on that Indiana is undefeated when there's been an episode of the Assembly Call scheduled, because Indiana didn't lose until well into December. That was obviously the year that Indiana beat Kentucky. And talk about hosting a show by yourself. I hosted the beginning of that show all by myself because Andy couldn't make it.
I was in Chicago with my girlfriend watching the game.
Yes.
Again, establishing that I wasn't going to be there, no matter how important the game was.
Yes, right. And now, in your defense, Ryan, or Andy, you did call in.
I did
during the show.
I had to work. Yeah, I had to work. We had this.
I did not.
Implementation that I kept thinking would get over, and it never got over. And I remember that was also the day that the UC Xavier brawl was, because I listened to that on my phone as well that day, and I was like, I'll get home by the time the IU game is. And I was listening to a stream of Fisher on my phone, but it was so far behind that my wife called, told me they won. I hung up on her so that I could listen to Don Fisher's call. I was like, I'm going to let you go so I can listen to this. The stream was far enough behind that I did that. And then I called Jared and attempted to provide commentary, or at least allow him to take a breath without having actually watched the game yet at that point.
Yeah, I was with my girlfriend in Chicago spending the weekend together. And I remember I just played the replay of the show. And the whole first 10 seconds of it is Jared going, woo. That is that's the intro to the show. There's nothing else other than just Jared screaming.
I'll post a link to that show in the show notes. I also had the bright idea of trying to put my phone up to the TV to try and do listen to the post-game celebration or interviews. That didn't go very well.
So
that was good radio.
I want to know, speaking about having the phone calls, I want to know what your guys do you have a craziest memory of doing the show? An awkward place you've done it from, or just a weird happening that happened while doing the show? Because I have mine, and it was after they lost to Syracuse in the Sweet 16. I called into the show from my phone inside. I was at a bar watching the game because my cable in the whole apartment building was out, so I had to watch it from a bar. I went across the street from the bar into a closed shopping mall when it was 5 degrees outside in Milwaukee. I'm inside the shopping mall with a security guard staring at me, calling in and telling him, look, I got to do this radio show. I have no, and I'm sitting there on my phone doing this with you, trying to commiserate with you guys, freezing in a deserted mall at midnight. It was insane. I mean, do you guys have any crazy?
I've always
stories?
taken it way too seriously, so I've always been like right at my computer, like doing it. I don't think I've ever done it from like a strange place.
I had, the one for me was probably, I stopped. It was when they beat Michigan to win the Big Ten, and so I was driving. That was when I was commuting between Cincinnati and Cleveland when I was starting a new job and like go back and forth on the weekends. I think weather was supposed to be bad or something, so I didn't stay and watch the game. I listened to it on the radio. Well, anybody who's driven between Cincinnati and Columbus on 71, there's this kind of oddly placed, like not even shopping center, but there's like a hotel and a Max and Irma's. And so I got to a point where like I could hear the game was good. There was like 2 minutes left. So I go into this place, order a beer, proceed to just pound this beer while the last couple of minutes of the game. I yell a couple things and pound on the bar when they win the game. And then I just turned up, paid my bill, and walked out. I probably was in there for no more than 10 minutes. And the people I'm sure all thought I was insane. And then I got back in the car and then called into the show to at least talk about the end part that I saw.
I will say, back in the day when we first started doing the show, and I don't do this now, but, every now and then I would have a nice beverage while watching the game and, come on the show, but always kept it under control. But you all will remember, you all will remember the horrible collapse against Penn State during the 2013-14 season. I'm pretty sure I had maybe a few more than usual during that game, and I remember feeling a little not quite myself while hosting that show. So that's probably my craziest story from hosting. But I think it went well. But I've tried to
the aftermath of that one.
Yeah, I've tried to block out all memory of that game. But
that was before
we starting early, trying to forget about it.
Yeah, that was before we were a big deal on the radio. Now we all take it super seriously.
Right. So there's obviously a lot more that we could tell Courtney. If you have any other specific questions, we'd love to answer. But thank you for asking that. It was actually really fun to go back and remember that. And
it's a good off-season topic.
It is. And all I will say is, we've done this show, as Ryan mentioned, we've only been in the same room a couple of times. But when we did that, it was 2 years ago in Bloomington. We had our first meetup, and it was crazy, meeting, both of you who I, hadn't met before, or I'd met you individually, but we hadn't all been in the same room. And, you would think that it might be a little bit awkward or weird, but, that same chemistry that we, have right here doing this was right there, when we met in person. So it's kind of a crazy testament to just what the internet, what technology makes possible.
We basically sit around and make fun of each other when we're in person too. It's pretty just like this, pretty much.
It's just our wives and girlfriends just happened to be there for that one, and they could laugh at the jokes with us. So that helped. All right, so that was fun. We still have a few more minutes left though in the show, so come back for our final segment. We've got a few other Twitter questions. We're going to answer them quickly, rapid fire style, some good ones. So stick with us, and we will do that next. All right, 13:51 on that segment.
Oh, actually, would have thought that went longer. So,
yeah, it felt like it went way longer.
We have 5 minutes and 31 seconds, so we have 4 minutes and 55 seconds to answer these questions.
Let's just do one of us answer each one.
Yeah, some of them are. I mean, some of them to me are
one-word answers,
fairly quick and somewhat related to one another.
Which Darius? 1 year of Romeo or 2 of Darius?
Garland.
Hayward
Garland.
Oh,
it was Garland, yeah.
All right, so this is going to be an interesting test of how loyal our audience is, because so far tonight we've talked about San Diego high school basketball. We've spent 13 minutes talking about our origin story. Hopefully people are into this. It's a little bit different than what we normally do, but
I'll say it's funny. It's funny though. I don't know if either of you guys listen to the Salad Verbal for college football podcast, but they've been, I think this is like their 10th year, and they just did an off-season show where it was like probably an hour and a half about kind of like how the show had grown and stuff like that, which I found as somebody who listened to it a lot was like, I really enjoyed it. I could see if you were, it probably is not something that if you didn't care about it, you wouldn't listen to, but it was kind of cool to listen to. Like, if you guys have time, it honestly was kind of funny. Some of the parallels of like, they talked about kind of how when they started to see it build, but all the times where it's like, I don't know if I want to do this and stuff like that. Like, there were definitely,
that never happens with this show.
Yeah, absolutely not. There were, but it was funny.
Maybe with you guys.
There were parts of it that that touched on that kind of stuff where there's a lot of parallels. It was kind of cool.
I mean, maybe we should do that. I mean, we have we're very blessed and fortunate to have a really loyal audience, and Like we got a really good YouTube comment from someone. Your show is awesome. Started listening 3 years ago and don't miss a post-game show. Love that you have expanded to this weekly show. Thank you for that, D-Do. I know. I mean, we probably could talk more about the growth of the show and let people in a little bit more on what's happening. We probably should.
I mean, especially on slow weeks. We're all going to be on.
Yeah.
All right, let's do this.
Or just bad games. Like next year, if there's just, although it won't be next year. We've got Archie. What am I talking about?
Yeah. There you go. All right.
Okay.
Let's do this.
Ready?
Yeah. You can start with whoever with questions, and if we don't all hit them all, then that's totally fine. But okay. Yeah, I think a lot of them are quick. So.
Yeah, you just keep us updated on time there, Jared.
Yeah.
I will. Yeah, what I say? We have
4:55, something like that.
4:55.
The 8 rotation players will probably take way too long.
Yeah, well, we know who the obvious ones are.
Yeah.
Okay. Here we go.
How do we know there'll only be 8? Won't we just play all 10 or 11? Are we not going to do that?
13. Here we go. You are listening to the Assembly Call. I'm Jared Morris here with Andy Bottoms and Ryan Phillips, wrapping up another week of talking IU basketball. And guys, we've got a few Twitter questions, so let's hit those quickly here in our final segment. The first question comes from Chris. Who's the next recruit to commit for 2018? And will we fill out the roster or hold one for 2019? Ryan, who do you think?
I think it's Robert Finney. I think that's the way the winds are blowing. And I also think he is undervalued nationally. So I think it'd be a great pickup. As for will we fill out the roster, I think it all depends on who's willing to come. If you're going to get if you're going to get another great player, then you're willing to expand this class and not hold one. But I think that the inclination would be to sort of spread them out over 2 years if you can.
Yeah,
but it all depends. I mean, if you're going to get a great player, you jump on it.
Yeah. Problem is you only have Morgan would theoretically be the only guy leaving after, we got a big class leaving this coming year. And then you've really only got Morgan, I think, is the only junior. So
we're in for a lot of good 2019 players too, which will be interesting. A lot of 5-star guys talking Indiana. Okay. So that remains to be seen. Next question from Ian. Andy, would you rather have 1 year of Romeo or 2 years of Darius Garland?
1 year of Romeo. I think just from
also,
obviously
really look like Darius Garland is,
the Romeo
real possibility.
The answer is Romeo Langford, guys. I'm sorry. The answer is Romeo Langford. There's no question about it.
That's what I said. This is my turn to answer the question.
That was okay. That was an easy one. Andy, you can have the next one. Okay, this is from Michael. Picks for surprising starters, and he offers up Devontae Green and Justin Smith as possibilities. He either overlooked Curtis Jones or he's assuming that Curtis Jones will be a starter, and that wouldn't be a surprise.
Or he's not as obsessed with Curtis as you are.
Yeah, Curtis Jones is your new Stan Robinson. I fear.
Andy, who do you think here? Pick for surprising starters.
I would, I've talked a lot about Devontae Green in the offseason being a potential starter. That I think he fits a lot of what Archie wants to do. Younger guy, do you err on the side of that of a guy that you can really, kind of build and start to groom? So I think of anybody, I think he's the one. He's the one that I would say, probably the one Ryan would say as well.
Yeah, I don't even think that would be that surprising. I think given the way he plays defense and his commitment to it, I think Archie's going to love him, and I think that's a good fit there. And you can also
starts over Newkirk, because I mean I'm guessing when he says surprising starters, this is assuming Johnson, Newkirk, Morgan, Hartman, and Deron Davis are your opening day starters.
I'm not saying I think he starts over Newkirk, but I'm saying if he did, I wouldn't find it terribly surprising if he was starting by the end of the year, just because I think he fits what Archie Miller wants to do perfectly.
Mm-hmm. All right. This question from Jack. Will Deron Davis average 15 plus points this year, and who will get the start alongside Robert Johnson this year? Andy, what do you think?
I would say yes. I mean, I think he's going to get every chance to get the ball out in the post. And I think if this season is going to be successful, certainly I think him averaging 15 points a game would do it. And as far as who gets the start alongside Rojo, I mean, I guess I go back to the other one, the prior question. If there's a surprise guy, it's Devontae Green. If there's a expected guy, it's probably Newkirk, because it feels like, the Deron Davis, Juwan Morgan, Colin Hartman feels like those are going to be, be starters. I would imagine, and then you would weave in Rojo, and I guess I'll stick with Green, but I think Newkirk is the other potential choice there.
Yeah, we should disqualify people who ask 2 questions in one tweet. Look, we ask for your Twitter questions. Ask us a question, then ask us another question in a separate tweet. Don't ask 2 in one tweet. That's why I think
we've never stipulated that before. So let's give folks a chance to adjust.
Okay, let's put the foot down then. Yes,
you answered a question at the beginning of the segment that was 2 questions.
Well, I'm not saying. Look, I'm not saying I'm consistent. I'm blaming them, not me. I'm perfect.
Unless you want to ask a multi-part question about San Diego high schools, then it's totally fine.
Then
Well,
it's fine.
choose your own adventure type scenario, then it's okay.
Okay, we got 50 seconds left. Matt's question is a good one. End of the year for IUBB. Who do you think is our rotation of 8 players? So again, let's assume Robert Johnson, Deron Davis, Juwan Morgan, Colin Hartman, Josh Newkirk. We'll throw Devontae Green in there because you guys both think that. Who else is in the rotation at the end of the year? Andy.
2 more players.
I think Clifton Moore has to be one, and I guess I'll say Freddie McSwain, but then that kind of leaves Curtis Jones out. So if I had to pick 9, I'd add those 2 to the 6 that you mentioned, or those 3 to the 6 you mentioned.
You guys are gonna start trolling me by just not mentioning Curtis Jones now.
I think
was not doing that. I just looked at who was there.
10 seconds, Ryan.
Curtis Jones, McSwain, and McRoberts are going to be in there.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see what freshmen make their way in. That'll be an interesting storyline as we go through the season, which we look forward to. All right, well, that will do it for us on this week's episode of the Assembly Call. If you want to see us do the show live and be part of the live chat, join us at assemblycall.com on Thursday nights for the live simulcast of our Assembly Call radio recording, or you can always subscribe to our podcast by searching for Assembly Call wherever you listen to podcasts. And don't forget to go to assemblycall.com/join to activate your free Assembly Call membership. Thank you for listening. We'll be back to talk IU hoops again with you next week. Until then, keep your elbows in and your eyes on the rim, and go Hoosiers. Well done, gentlemen. All right. That was fun. That was a fun show for a slow week of news.
So who do you think is going to be the guest picker?
I don't know. Oladipo, probably.
I think they're going to go after Cuban, but I would agree. I think Oladipo's the easy one.
Get the Coug out there. Come on.
They should have Bill Mallory out there and just play footage of the 86 and 87 IU Ohio State football games over and over again.
Darkest day
in Ohio State history.
Yeah, that would be exciting. I wonder if they would do something. I mean, because Corso will obviously already be there, so he's got IU ties. So I was trying to think if there's anything they could kind of tie into that, but I don't know what that would. Randall L, maybe.
He's been talking about how he has a lot of mental problems now from football. So
maybe not.
I don't know. I don't know. It seems like that might be a tough one.
Oh yeah, let's get Bob Knight.
Yeah,
that'll go well.
Probably not. Not going to happen. All right. So, hey, who is – so Zach is out kind of for the foreseeable future. We can do some of these with 2. And, there are probably some nights if we want to bring Alex on, we can probably bring Alex on and find some other guests. That might be a fun way to kind of liven up the rest of the off season. Andy, you're out next week, right?
Yeah, I can't do it next week.
Okay. Ryan, are you in?
I should be okay, yeah.
Okay. So worst comes to worst, it'll just be the 2 of us. And we'll – oh, man.
That is truly the worst.
Yeah.
The worst of both worlds.
Hey, that's how the show started, though.
It is.
Just going back to our roots.
Apparently so.
All right, gents.
Andy, had you not missed that show, I probably never would have gotten involved.
No, I bet it would have happened.
Given my track record, it appears I would certainly have missed others. So you probably have been okay.
Yeah.
All right.
And we'll have a call soon, maybe in a couple weeks or something, and talk kind of plans for upcoming season. Get our ducks in a row for what we want to do.
All for it.
Okay.
All right.
Cool, guys.
Sounds
good.
Later.
Talk to you soon.
Later.
Oh, see you, everybody.
Bye.
We were still live.
Everybody else too.
Yeah.
All right. See you later.